What year were women given the right to vote? 1920 is what it says through a quick Google search. 1920 is the year printed in our elementary school history textbooks. 1920 is the year young women around the country will grow up believing when they finally had a voice. If I lived back in the 1900s, that would be the year when I finally had a say in what went on in my own life. But regardless of what I grew up learning, that doesn't tell the whole story. In fact, Black women, Latino women, and other women of color had to work for nearly half a century more, and they put up a huge fight to get the chance to vote. But I don't see that mentioned anywhere in my textbooks. The legislature passed in 1920 stopped election officials from limiting one's right to vote on the basis that they were a woman. It said nothing about giving all women the right to vote, yet I wouldn't know that if I didn't go farther than just asking Siri. Women of color continued their fight, yet they aren't mentioned at all in the textbooks. When we see that women were given the right to vote, it only means white women. But the people who wrote our history down didn't think that they need to specify that white preceded the word women, but because it's explicit, it's the default. Because we should all know by now to assume that every fact we're learning about in class is from a Western perspective. They don't think that specifying that in 1920 white women were given the chance to vote is necessary, because in their heads they put white up on a pedestal. Everything else is not necessary to mention. Why would I assume that when I hear about an activist fighting for women's rights that they mean women of color too? Society has drawn an invisible line between people of color and white people, to the point where women of color aren't even considered when using the term women as a whole. Does me being of Indian origin stop me from being a woman in any way? No. Doing that makes white considered the normal, as if learning about white history is the only thing that we, an incredibly racially diverse country, needs to even learn about. In doing that, they unknowingly create a bias. We've been raised learning history from a white man's perspective. The scope of everything covered in our classes is rarely written down by a person of color. We mentioned in passing in history class that 19 million natives in Mexico were killed when the Spaniards came. Yet we spent months studying the gold rush. I don't think it's picking one or the other that is necessary. I think we need to have a balance between seeing every story from every point of view. And for young kids learning about this, it's so important to see themselves and their history portrayed along with everyone else's, to know that they aren't any less important. All the things we learn in our classroom affect us so greatly in life, which is one of the reasons why the most important place to bring inclusion and teach about diversity is the classroom. Children, teenagers, we're sponges. We're the first to pick up any ideas you drop out, the first to adapt and mold to them. It's the hardest to explain to an adult your point of view because they've clung so tightly for so long to a certain set of beliefs. Even from a young age, we can see that dislike or hate starts from a lack of understanding. We fear what we don't know, whatever is different from what we're used to. You see less racism in more diverse parts of our country because of more familiarity. We need to create that familiarity everywhere so that people don't call others weird or exotic or use offensive terms that they might not even know were offensive. I don't believe any child is born innately with hate. They are a product of their environment, which means that we need to make the environment a more inclusive place.